You're wondering, why am I wearing this little beret? Why this little beret in the middle of July? This is my little director's hat. Today I'm playing director, and I'm trying to see what books would be great as movies. Books that have never been made into movies, books that have been made into movies, but I think they need a bit of a redo, and books I think that would be impossible to make into movies. Hi. If you're new here, my name is Catherine, and I'm here to talk about books, and today a little bit about movies as well. I love movies. If I'm not reading a book, I'm usually watching a movie. I feel like I watch a movie maybe every other day. Like, it's just something that my boyfriend and I love to do, and I've seen a lot at this point, which makes me a little bit of a expert. No, I'm not an expert. I'm just chronically online, and I just love the visual medium. And often I love when books that I love are turned into movies, and sometimes that comes to bite me in the butt, because sometimes the adaptation is so bad that it really just smacks me across the face, and I'm like, this is a disgrace to the story. This needs a complete redo. And then there's some where I've read these books and I'm like, where is the movie of this? I think this would be so good as a movie, and it's just, we haven't made it. Since I love movies, but I'm not a filmmaker. I do not know the first thing about making a movie. This is really all just for fun. Maybe somewhere someone will watch this video and be inspired and take my idea. If they take my idea, I won't be too mad about it, because I'm putting it out there on the internet for everybody to see. Some credit would be nice, just a little nod to the channel would be nice if you got a film idea from this movie. But also, I just want someone to do it. I just want someone who is way more capable, way more powerful to take these ideas and run with it. And I think this is just fun, because it shows that I'm a movie person as well. I'm also on Letterboxd. If you are also on Letterboxd, I will put my little username here. You can see what I watch, you can see what I'm into, you can see what I rate these movies. I don't really write reviews because I am not nearly as witty as the people on Letterboxd, but every so often I slip a little commentary in there. But just also to give you a framework of what we're working with and what I like in terms of movies, I'm just going to give you what I've put on my profile as my top 4 movies. And this just should give you an idea of who I am and what I like to watch. My top 4 movies of all time are Spirited Away by Hayao Miyazaki, Singin' in the Rain, directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly, Amadeus, directed by Milos Forman, and Harold and Maude by Hal Ashby. You're probably like, this girl is unhinged. But those, in my opinion, are the 4 best movies ever. So book Catherine is gone, and director Catherine is now here. This is my director hat. We are going to figure out what movie we want to direct, and what movie desperately needs a redo, because God, some of these. Starting with one that I want to fight this director. I want to fight this man for making this movie this way, although it probably was out of his hands. Still don't care. He still gave us this monstrosity. It's the movie The Giver, which came out in 2014. This was really, I felt like I sat in the theater and I just got smacked in the face. Like, the director literally went through the screen and went, dummy, because this was not at all like the book. The book is by Lois Lowry. It's a beautiful young adult book. I read this in 7th grade. It was one of my favorite books, and I would say, to this day, it was one of my favorite books as a kid. It's a very quiet story. It's about this boy Jonas who lives in this community where everybody is assigned a role when they turn 13. And his role is assigned to him as the receiver, which they haven't had this person for a while, but he goes and visits this person called the Giver, who has all these memories of what life used to be like before everything kind of changed, and the Giver is basically passing these memories to Jonas of what love is, what family is, what pain is, what war is, and it's just this gorgeous story. It's very subtle, it's very quiet, there's like subtly evil things in it too, which Lois Lowry just does a beautiful job of making it digestible to a younger audience, and it's just a very quiet, very thoughtful book. And they literally, with this adaptation, like, took it, punched it in the gut, and went, go out there, go be Hunger Games. I don't care what you are, go out and be Hunger Games. This was right around the time when Hunger Games was coming out, Divergent was coming out, Maze Runner was coming out, so I think somebody in Hollywood was like, The Giver is dystopian. Put her out there, she's one of those, and it's not that same type of book, but they tried to make it into that, like, high-stakes thriller, almost game show or almost competition-esque teen dystopian. It's not bad. It is not bad. If I were a director, I'd say absolutely not. I'm taking this back. And I'm giving it to a 24. I'm gonna make this a very quiet, young adult, like I think, you know, it may be PG-13 rated movie, but we're going to slow it way the heck down. Bring it to mostly black and white, which I believe the 2014 movie did because it's a big element of the story. We're gonna take a lot of the like dun 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 kind of music out. We're not doing that. We're just going to make it a very thoughtful movie about what it means to take on these memories and what is life if we don't have love, what is life if we don't have pain, are we really living, and would you choose to live in a world with pain so that you could live in a world with love? That's what the book is about, and that adaptation didn't happen, so that in my mind would get a redo. The next is Moby Dick, which, hold on, I got the book. I want to direct Moby Dick. Moby Dick has already been made into a movie, so if you haven't noticed, right now we are going on a remakes kind of bed. Moby Dick has been made, technically. It was made in 1956, directed by John Huston, starring Gregory Peck as Captain Ahab. It's been done. This is not a movie I'd say that's like classic, like Hollywood movie. Like, I don't think it's a movie that outshines the weight of the book. I have yet to see this movie, so maybe I have no grounds to be like, alright, this needs a remake. But in my mind, it, like, the CGI that we have now and the special effects that we have now are so advanced that I feel like this could be really epic. Like, this could be really, really well done. The scale of the whale, it could be really epic now. I am a huge fan of the Mad Max world, especially Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa. So in my mind, like, two beautiful examples of filmmaking and world building. The stakes are high, a lot of it is practical effects instead of CGI, and it's just so, like, thrilling. And so I want George Miller to direct a version of Moby Dick. And maybe it has a Dropkick Murphys soundtrack. Like, I just want it to be, like, really epic, and I want it to really capture the experimental nature of the novel. Because a lot of the novel is Herman Melville being like, we have a chorus of sailors. Okay, we're going into this thing about whales. Okay, now we have this little bit about Starbucks. Like, boop, 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 boop. And I want it to be this, like, beautiful kaleidoscope of experimentation while also, like, maintaining the epic nature of going to hunt for these whales, and specifically for the one named Moby Dick. And I just think it needs that. Like, it needs something like it being almost mythical, like larger than life. And of what I've seen of the trailer and like bits of the 1950s movie, I don't think it has that same magnitude, probably because the filmmaking just wasn't at that stage yet. Not because they wouldn't, but probably because they couldn't, you know? Whereas now we're at such a magnitude of making these movies. I think it could be really, really cool. Next is Wide Sargasso Sea. So technically, Wide Sargasso Sea has had two adaptations of what I could find. There was a 1993 movie directed by John Duigan, and there was a PBS movie in 2006 directed by Brendan Maher, starring Rebecca Hall, who is a fabulous actress. And of what I could see, they don't seem like the best adaptations. This book would be tricky to master. This book, if you don't know, I'm not going to give too much of it because it is technically a prequel to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, but this is by Jean Rhys. This was written in the 60s, and it's about a specific character in Jane Eyre and her origins growing up in the islands, specifically Dominica. And this would be tricky because the writing in this sets such a beautiful tone, and it makes it so eerie and discordant and very, like, off. And it's all due to Jean Rhys being able to just, like, really hone in on the tone and really create a great atmosphere that I'm not sure, just seeing the movies, I'm not sure the movies were able to get that kind of uncanniness. They definitely got the romance part of it, which is also very apparent in the book. You're like, ooh, steamy. Okay, Antoinette. It gets steamy, and I think the movies definitely honed in on that element of it. I don't know if they got the real outsider nature of it, the uncanniness, the eeriness, the aliveness of the island. I'm not sure that shines through as much. So I would want something that, like, really, it's not a horror movie, but something that's just kind of like a picnic at Hanging Rock. Like, things just feel a little ethereal and a little dreamlike and a little not real, to the point that you may trust some characters at some point but not trust some at others, and everything just feels kind of wonky and funky until the scene shifts and they go to England, and then it becomes like stark reality. That's what I'd be looking for. So if I was a director, I would really want to look at this book. I can't think off the top of my head what director would do this justice. I would say Peter Weir, because he did Picnic at Hanging Rock, and that's like the kind of vibe I would want for at least the first 2/3 of the book. I don't know what director I'd want, but I would want something very like heady and out there. This next book I don't have. I finished this at the end of 2022, like right before going into 2023, and I hated this book. It was The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller. Waller. I did not like this book. I thought this was Corn City. And I'm okay if things are kind of corny, but it's like, we're in on the joke. This book was not that kind of self-aware. This book was very in earnest and very earnestly corny, and I don't vibe with it. This is essentially a book about Robert Kincaid. He is a photographer, and he is set to go take photos of Iowa's very famous covered bridges, the bridges of Madison County, Iowa. When he's out there, he meets this Italian housewife who he basically shows up to her farm and is like, I'm looking for this bridge. And she's like, okay, I'll help you find this bridge. Man, I don't know. And what strikes up is sexual tension, and they wind up spending 4 days together while her husband is out of town at the county fair. How Iowa of him. And it's about really like these two were long lost soulmates basically, but they, because of circumstance and because she is a devoted housewife and because he is a wanderer, a vagabond, he has to keep roaming and she feels bound to stay in Iowa. So they separate at the end of the book. Incredibly corny. I was like, this feels like a Hallmark movie, this feels cheesy, this feels a little too convenient. It also felt like Robert James Waller was trying to tell us like how unfair it is. Oh, it's so unfair. I'm like, boy, you don't know how unfair it gets. I'm like, I've read books where it gets unfair. Go talk to Fantine and Les Mis. That's unfair. So this is a movie already. It's directed by Clint Eastwood with Meryl Streep. Clint Eastwood as the photographer, which, no. He's supposed to be hot. No. It's Meryl Streep as the housewife, which I will say is an age-appropriate relationship in this movie, because this movie came out in 1995. So at least she's not like 20, you know? The movie is supposed to be excellent. I haven't seen it because, again, I was like, the story to me was so stupid, I don't want to waste my time, but I do see people do say the movie is very good. Perhaps I will watch it at some point. However, a movie version I would want to see of this. Months ago at at Steppenwolf, I saw, Steppenwolf was a very famous theater company in Chicago. They did a production. It wasn't their production, it was, they have basically a theater at their theater that has guest performances come in. So these people were here for maybe a month. It was a drag performance where the two drag performers played Susan Sarandon and Julia Roberts during the filming of the movie Stepmom. And it was imagining that they were lovers on the set. Like they met on this movie and they fell in love and were in a relationship. And it was so funny because it was like using the comedy of that very cheesy 90s movie, but it was the two of them in drag, and it was like the two of them in a lesbian relationship. Like, it was so funny and so creative and so good. So I want that, but I want the Bridges of Madison County. I want it to be two men in drag playing two lesbians again. Like Robert Kincaid would just be a woman. Or it could be a drag king. It could be a drag king playing Robert Kincaid, but it's a drag queen playing the housewife. I want a spoof version, because I saw that Stepmom show and I thought that was so brilliant. I want that with Bridges of Madison County because I want to take kind of the piss out of it. Anyway, no more hate. No more hate for that. If you like it, continue to like it. I just don't like if something is corny and isn't self-aware that it's corny, basically. Anyway, moving on to new films. This is stuff where maybe there's like a rare, like, obscure TV movie hidden somewhere, but for the most part I didn't really find much evidence that there is a movie of these books, and I think they need a movie because I think that'd be really, really cool. The first one is The Hearing Trumpet by Lenora Carrington. I read this earlier this year. It's a fabulous little book. Very surreal. Surreal with a capital S. Leonora Carrington is actually better known as a painter. She was an English painter who mostly painted in Mexico City. Very surreal. Contemporary of Max Ernst. She and Max Ernst actually had a relationship, even though she was quite his junior. But her paintings are beautiful if you've never looked them up. They are stunning. And I believe I talked about this, I would have finished this in February, so watch my February wrap-up if you want like a full review of this book. It's basically about this older lady named Marion. She goes to live in like an old folks home, and this old folks home is very peculiar and different. And it's run by this kind of Christian cult. They have the older women in this community do these exercises over and over again. And they all live in these like little like everyone's little house looks like something, like a piece of cake, or it looks like a shoe, and it just like looks like this magical mystical land. But really underneath it all is like what is like kind of at the heart of this story is this abbess, this nun, who is trying to summon the spirit of Venus. Like she's actually technically into like pagan religions, and she's trying to summon Venus. And at the end of the story, basically all of the old women overthrow the director, I guess, of their old age community, and they just summon Venus, basically as like a witchy cult. So it's got everything. It's got nuns, it's got cults, it's got Venus, it's got a second ice age that comes in. Like, this book just goes like... And while I was reading this, I was thinking of Leonora Carrington's paintings. Like, I was kind of imagining everybody in this world looks like the people and the strange creatures in her paintings, which look like a weird combination of like Dali and Bosch. And I kind of thought, I was like, what if it was claymation? Because in my mind, there is not enough claymation in this world. We don't have enough. I love claymation. A fifth favorite movie that's not on there is Chicken Run. Like, I stan Chicken Run so hard. I stan Coraline so hard. I just love the art of claymation. I think it's brilliant. And for certain stories, it just gives the right, truly, like there's no other way to say it, like it gives the right texture of just like these little like slimy little creatures, or like, and they move kind of disjointedly. It just, for some stories, really ties it all up with a nice bow. And I think with this story in particular, it would be brilliant as a claymation movie. If I were to get into any type of animation, I'd be with the clay people. That's the only thing in art class I was good at, was ceramics. That is what I would get into. Do I have the patience for it? I don't know about that, but somebody would. Tim Burton, somebody, Aardman Studios, somebody pick this up and make this into a claymation movie. It would be great. My camera's dying. I'll be right back. We're back. Went to Crafty. Went to go talk to the AD. You know, usual director stuff I gotta do. The next book I wanted to talk about is one that I haven't really spent that much time talking about yet on this channel, but it's such a great book. It's called They by Kay Dick. This is a really excellent book. It's very short. It's basically a collection of short stories, but they're all interconnected. It's kind of dystopian. It's about England, essentially, but there's been this entity that's taken over England, and they're always referred to as they. They don't really have a name, but they're this loose association of people. And in this world, in this kind of dystopian England, art is banned, literature's banned, any kind of free thinking is banned. And the characters in these kind of interconnected stories are kind of rebelling against they, are kind of rebelling against this new norm, but they is ever encroaching, always coming in and always trying to take over. And it's a really eerie book, really eerie, really quiet, and just fills you with just dread. Like there's just like a really great level of dread that's spread all throughout these stories and all throughout this book. It's such a strange book, but it's a really, really good one. Also just like very quintessentially English. Like even though they're in this kind of strange environment and in this strange dystopian world, everything is still very manners-centric, everyone's still very polite. There's still this guise of, you know, things are going on as normal even though they are coming. We literally see them coming. It's very eerie. And I think this could be done maybe as like a good short film, like a really kind of eerie short film. If you've ever seen the movie Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene with Elizabeth Olsen, great movie. And that came originally from a short film that had what I think would be the right tone. I can't remember the name of the short film. Full length feature is very good. It's about a woman who joins a cult, basically, in upstate New York. And the short story is about this woman and her boyfriend like going to visit people on this farm, and he kind of leaves her there, and that's how she kind of gets inducted into this cult. But it's really, really quiet and really weird, and it would give very similar feelings to this. Something just really stripped back, and they would just be these kind of like amorphous figures in the background. For me in horror, there's like nothing scarier when there's like something in the background, or like something in the background that isn't moving, or it just like cuts to these figures kind of far away that aren't moving yet. That's why I find The Shining to be terrifying, because he plays a lot with perspective and about like two people standing, and then he cuts to the subject again, and then it cuts back to them, but they're closer now. Like those kind of things frighten me so badly. If you did something like that with this, it would be very effective and very creepy. But something short, I think like a 20-30 minute film would be excellent for this. Next is one that I am dying for an adaptation for. Give me an adaptation of this book, please. It's The Custom of the Country by Edith Wharton, which is not one I've talked about much on this channel, because I think I read this in 2022 before I really started getting into BookTube, and I love this book. This is like a 4.5, almost 5 star, really truly getting to be one of my favorites. This is an excellent novel. This is about Undine Sprague. She's a young woman. She has her family move to New York because she's like, that's where we should be. That's where I want to be. We have to live in New York, and I want to be in high society of New York, and I want the best dresses, and I want to go to the best parties. I want the most eligible bachelors to be after me. I want it all. She's basically like the Sharpay Evans of early 19th century or early 20th century New York. And she's just basically a spoiled brat. She's someone who's just going to do whatever she can to be on top, to be the best, to have the best of everything, and to be kind of the talk of the town. At the expense of pretty much everyone around her. Around her parents, around the man she marries, around literally anyone. She's just out to get what she wants in the beginnings of like really hyper-capitalist society in the States. And this is so good. This book is like reading juicy gossip, but like reading very well written with fleshed out characters, juicy like 1910s gossip. I want an adaptation of this, and I want Sofia Coppola to do her adaptation of this. Sofia Coppola was supposed to do a miniseries on Apple TV, and it was supposed to have Florence Pugh as Undine Sprague, which would have been so good. Apparently this article I found on Deadline said that Apple pulled the funding for it and pulled this project essentially because Undine Sprague was just too unlikable. And I was like, too unlikable? How many male characters do we have, male protagonists do we have in TV that are unlikable, that got seasons of shows? And Undine Sprague is just a little too bitchy for you, and you won't fund it. In 2024, that is so lame. I thought we were over being upset with there being unlikable female characters. I thought we were kind of over that, but apparently not. I would have killed for a miniseries of this. I would have devoured it. I would have loved it. I want it! I want it! I think Sofia Coppola would be the perfect person to direct this, considering she did Marie Antoinette. Like, I don't know. Apple, I don't know what they're thinking. I need to see all the dresses. I need to see her having like a 2000s montage of like trying on all her dresses and racking up a bill for her father. I need to see it. Rant over. Next, we need an adaptation of The Monk. Where is our movie of Matthew Lewis's The Monk? This would be such a crazy movie. Almost like in the vein of what I was speaking of with Moby Dick. Like, we just need this to be so epic that it can't be excused. Like, you can't ignore it. It's so insane. If you don't know the story of The Monk, dude. Matthew Lewis wrote this in the late 18th century. He was 19 when he wrote it, which kind of makes sense. You're like, this is something a 19-year-old boy would totally write, but the sophistication and the level of writing, you're like, this was a very advanced 19-year-old man. This is about a monk. His name is Ambrose. He lives in Madrid, and he basically breaks his vows. I'm not going to go into how he breaks his vows. He just does, and all of a sudden he kind of spirals. In this also, though, there's like stories of robbers, there's stories of marauders and murderers. It's also kind of a morality tale. It's got very like damsel in distress characters, and also very much like the chivalrous, typical Spanish male kind of characters in here. It's got a lot going on. I read this when I went on my trip to South Korea, which was an odd choice because it was so not South Korea. But I had this when I was there and it was so good. Like I found myself wanting to read this all the time. Very gothic, very creepy, bonkers, off the wall. And I think this could be amazing. I just watched for the first time Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola. I want that. I want that with this. I want this. Francis Ford Coppola, get your daughter to do Custom of the Country and get your butt on this because I want that kind of madness. Someone put it on Letterboxd that it was like the best and the worst movie ever made because it was. Like it was just so campy and so over the top. Keanu Reeves, like with all those vampire ladies, like, and then like all of like the creeping camera angles. Like I want that but with the monk because there's cross-dressing monks in this, there are demons, there are marauders, there are men on horseback committing murder. Like there is everything in this and it just needs to be like that kind of self-aware, campy, over the top, like blah. And with some heavy metal music, I mean this would just be amazing. I always, whenever I reference this, I always reference heavy metal because it feels like Matthew Lewis would just be like he was somewhere in like a gothic English castle writing this book and it needs a crazy adaptation. The Monk. I'm not the one who's going to make them. I have no money and I have no talent in movie making. I just have opinions and a YouTube channel. So somebody can make it. It's just not gonna be me. If you want me to play Ambrose, I'll play Ambrose. I'll do it. Next we have a book I haven't really talked that much about, but it is an excellent book. I read this in 2020 during the pandemic when I had little else to do but read a lot. I read this in like 2 days. I couldn't put it down. It's John Dollar by Marianne Wiggins. Yo, this book is a lot. This book is heavy. It will tear you up. It'll spit you out. It is incredibly sad, but so beautiful and so beautifully written. So this is about a group of schoolgirls. It's like the beginning of the 20th century. They are English schoolgirls, but they're living in the English colony of Burma, which is now the country of Myanmar. And these girls go on a school trip on this ship, and while they're on this school trip there is a giant storm and they get shipwrecked on an island, and the only people that are left are these little girls on this trip and a sailor that was with them on the ship named John Dollar. Now listen, there hasn't been a movie made of this, maybe just because there wasn't enough interest and someone didn't know how to turn this into a movie. I think this would be very difficult because there are some very disturbing scenes. There's some beautiful romance in it. John Dollar and an adult, not one of the children, have a relationship that's really beautiful. There's really great discussions about colonialism and about racism. There's a native child who is with the rest of these English schoolgirls and they treat her horribly because she's seen as not one of them. So there's great conversations about race and great conversations about colonialism that happen in this. It's all like very subtle. This is the girls' version essentially of Lord of the Flies. If Lord of the Flies is all like, Piggy, I'm gonna beat you up, and it's all like brash, this is so how girls are sinister. The way the girls like pit themselves against one another, at least before the storm and before the crash, sets it up for what is to come. There's one particular scene in this book that will never leave me. It is so haunting and so disturbing that specifically with children involved would be probably, you couldn't film it. It would be a lot. I read it and was like, oh shit. What I actually think this would work well as, maybe not a film, but a play. Because I'm always thinking about plays. I'm always thinking about what could be adapted, what would look great on stage. This would be beautiful on stage, especially because it is kind of a tradition, maybe not a tradition, but it's a common thing in theater that adults will play children. And it's not even like they hire adults that look like children. They just hire adults and say they're playing children, and everybody, because you're already going to a theater to suspend your disbelief, you go, yeah, that clearly 30-year-old woman is playing a 12-year-old child, and we're just going with that. That's way more common and done a lot in theater. There's a great play called The Wolves by Sarah DeLapp, which is about teenage girls on a soccer team. But if you go see a production, it's going to be adults who play it, and sometimes, yeah, they get young adults, like women in their earlier 20s, early to mid-20s, but it could be pretty much any age, and anyone going to the play is going to go, yep, that's a 15-year-old girl. So if you had adults playing this as children, I think it also would just like enhance the book itself, and it enhanced the themes in it. Like, it would be beautiful, and like the scenes on the sea and like what you could do on stage with that, with fabric, with just minimal set pieces. A storm on stage is always, we love the Tempest. We love a good storm sea scene on stage. It would be actually stunning. So I think this would make a great play. I think it would great, maybe a musical. It would be fantastic on the stage. I think particularly because you could really suspend disbelief and have adults play children, and it'd be a little bit more bought. Because again, there's scenes in here where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if we want to put kids in that. Yeah, but pick this book up. Read John Dollar. This is an excellent book. Ooh, yes. So this isn't a book I have with me. It's at my parents' house somewhere, and I have to rescue it. But The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Now, this was not able to be published in Russia for a very long time. This book was banned. It was suppressed. It was finally re-released. So this was written around, like, I believe the 50s and 60s. But it was suppressed for a very long time. And it only really, I believe in the 90s, became able to be published, and then was also like distributed to a wider audience. This is a fantastic book. So this is basically about the devil coming to Moscow. The devil comes to Moscow and he brings a big giant talking black cat named Behemoth, and they basically just kind of bewitch some people in Moscow. They bewitch a woman, they bewitch all these people, and it's a crazy bonkers book. Also one of those ones that just feels like off the wall, especially the imagery of like women naked on broomsticks flying around. This big giant talking cat that everybody's like, yeah, come on down. It's such a fun, zany read with also some like philosophy thrown in there. It's just a very complicated book. And I think Baz Luhrmann would do this beautifully, because I feel like when I read this, I would get images of like when they drink absinthe in Moulin Rouge and it all gets really like, the first time I ever watched Moulin Rouge, I'd say the first 20 to 30 minutes, my brain literally didn't know how to process it. I was 12, by the way, so I'm like watching it like, I don't really know, like there's so many colors, people's faces are right here. Don't know how to properly synthesize all this. And then once it slowed down a bit to then pick back up at certain parts, I was like, oh, this is one of the best movies ever made. And I still will stand by that. I love Moulin Rouge. Any theater person you ever talk to will love Moulin Rouge. It's just part of the deal. I feel like that energy is needed for this movie. Like, it could even start quieter, it can start smaller, but it has to come to a pitch. It has to come to like everybody in Moscow is losing their minds and they don't know why, and it's just some man with a mustache being like, he'd do it right. He's done a lot of things right. That Elvis movie? I don't know, but he definitely did Moulin Rouge right, and that's the kind of vibe I'd want for The Master and Margarita. Where is my adaptation of Sula? Where is my adaptation of Sula by Toni Morrison? Oh wait. Sula. Excellent book. Excellent, excellent novel. I've read many of Toni Morrison's work at this point. Sula is definitely, if not my favorite, is definitely one of my favorites. Definitely top 3. This is about 2 girls. They live in Ohio. And it's a classic, like, they're best friends, but they're best friends and they love each other so much that it almost turns into hatred. Like, have you ever had one of those friendships? Female identifying people looking at you and you just love a friend so much and you almost like, you are maybe in love with them, but you also want to be them, but you also then kind of hate them because it's just like that's the kind of relationship these 2 women have. And as they grow up and as they kind of grow into their communities, one becomes very much the pillar of society and one, Sula, becomes the pariah of the society. And then what is, on either side of that. Someone set on fire in this. Where is the movie adaptation? Where is it? Where are my 2 strong black female leads to do this? We have them. We have them now. It's the year 2024. Please! This would be so good. Or as like a mini-series. Maybe just a movie. Just like a straight one-off, hour-and-a-half, 2-hour movie. It'd be so good. It'd be so good. Next, we have a book that I also don't have with me. It's also somewhere at my parents' house. Maybe for good reason, because I don't know if I want to unearth this book again. This is The WASP Factory by Ian Banks. This is a crazy story. When I tell you a crazy, crazy story. I read this, I bought it when I was in Ireland, when I was studying abroad. I remember buying it from just like a little bookseller, like a guy on the side of the street, and he looked at me and he was like, well, this one's kind of scary. And I was like, I know. And then I read it and I was like, oh, he was right. This is terrifying. This is a Scottish book. This is about a boy who lives with his father. They live in kind of a very remote, on the hill, away from everybody house. The father has something up with him, but you don't really know what's going on with the father. But the boy himself is basically a serial killer. He has killed at a very young age when he was still a kid. And he has this hobby of taking animals and hurting them, essentially. And he has this little thing that he calls the WASP Factory, where he'll catch a wasp, he'll put the wasp at the center of this construction that he's made, and the wasp will choose to go into these little rooms that he's made. And in each of these rooms is some horrible way that the wasp could be hurt and or very like H.H. Holmes, but for wasps. Very typical serial killer type behavior, basically. Torture of small animals, that's a very big indicator that you may not have empathy for other people. This is the case with this child. And it just takes you through his mind and what happens between him and his father and his relationship to other people, and it's just a creep fest. This is a creepy book. Feel like something weird? It definitely was worth reading, and I was like morbidly into it, but I remember being like, this gave me the creeps. This was also before I really was getting into horror movies and or horror books, so I remember this was my first like, oh, this one's a lot. Once again, I come to you and I say, this should be claymation. Maybe to distance ourselves a little bit from it, to make it a little bit more like, oh, this is in some different world than ours. Making this claymation would be so cool, especially because I can imagine the house he lives in. The father often is like in his study and keeps the door locked, so the boy will often like refer to his father behind this closed door, or as he's like leaving the house, he just is like, and that is my father's room. Anyway, it's very like, oop, something's not right back there. Something's not right. And there's something about the way the Scottish countryside is described with the house, how creepy the house is. I just imagine like the house in Coraline, like it just is like old and decrepit. And if it was Tim Burton, like the proportions would be crazy. I just see this as claymation. I really do. But like very eerie, creepy claymation, because it can be used for horror, and I think it is used in like a kind of campy, goofy Tim Burton way, but it could be like actually scary. Stop motion is a scary movie that uses stop motion, clay animation, but it mostly takes place in real life, but the characters in the movie are stop motion artists. So like it can be done, but I'm saying this would be completely in stop motion claymation, and it could just be creepy. Another point for claymation, when I open my claymation studios, those are the two, the Hearing Trumpet and the WASP Factory. This is one that there were plans to make it into a movie, and they never did because unfortunately the writer passed away and the interest for the book unfortunately waned with her death. It's The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. I read this earlier this year and I really liked it. This is technically a horror classic, but it was kind of a forgotten classic for a while. As I mentioned, the writer passed away kind of unexpectedly and really young, and so once she passed away, there wasn't really anyone advocating for the work. But this is a creepy little tale. It's the kind of horror I like, where it's kind of folk horror. It's really based around events that could actually happen. It's about this town in New Hampshire. It's contemporary, it takes place in the 70s. And it's a really tiny town, really small. It's got a very tiny population, and not much happens. They're very bucolic. There's this auctioneer comes to town, though. He's a brand new guy. And he just starts asking people, hey, do you have stuff that you want to put up for auction? We're doing an auction to raise money to bring a police force into the town because crime is coming in. It's getting crazy out there. Crime is coming into this community, so we have to make sure that we get a police force. So the main character and his family donate stuff. Everybody in the town donates stuff. But slowly and slowly, the auctioneer just starts taking more and more and more and more until he basically controls the town. And it just creates this really, like, paranoid, very uncomfortable feeling all around the town. Everybody starts to look at each other strangely. Everybody's acting strangely. There are auctions where things go so far where you're like, what is going on here? Does it get like scary? No, but it gets eerie. You would think this was a Stephen King book. I think Stephen King would take it like a bit farther because he's Stephen King and he's a little weirdo. I bet you Stephen King read this and went, darn. I should have thought of that. Dang, Joan. Apparently was going to be made into a movie, and then it just kind of fell apart. It never happened, because when this was first released, this was a really popular book. And so now I'm like, do it. Why don't we do it? Let's make this movie. I think it actually would be really cool. This is me right now pitching to my board. I would want Ty West for this. If you are into the X trilogy, X, Pearl, and Maxine, I feel like he'd be the right person for this, especially after seeing X and after seeing a movie that he did before the X trilogy, which was called House of the Devil. The way he filmed House of the Devil, I was like, this man loves 70s horror movies. The way it was filmed, the camera, the shots, it was so 70s. It felt like When a Stranger Called. Like, it literally felt like that movie. And I was like, well, that's what I want. Like, I want a time capsule. I want it to be shot like it is a 70s movie. It's the movie we never got. And maybe almost using it, as like found footage or like lost footage. Ty West would do this well. Especially because I don't think Ty West... How do I put this nicely? I don't think Ty West has done an incredible job, I'd say, of writing his own material, but he knows how to master genre. He knows genre pieces and knows how to master them very well. Maxine was such an example. Maxine was like a beautiful homage to the 80s and the Satanic Panic of the 80s and the Fear of Richard Ramirez in the 80s, and it was an 80s genre flick, but the story sucked. Sorry if you're a Maxine fan, but I'm sorry, that script was not good. But if he had source material to work from, and then he just made it into like a very like classic 70s movie, it'd be fun. It'd be a fun time. I'm here for it. The Auctioneer. And now as like a last little fun bonus section, I thought it'd be fun to go over books that I think would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to adapt. Again, I am not a filmmaker. I know nothing. I literally just consume a lot, and so I notice patterns and I know how movies are made. My boyfriend has worked in production before and has told me a whole litany of how things are done. But that doesn't mean I'm an expert. I know nothing. But these are books that when I read them, I'm like, I think there's a reason this doesn't have a movie. I think there's a reason, because this would be so incredibly hard to adapt. One of which is one of my favorite horror books, and that's House of Leaves. There's always discourse around, yes, there's going to be a House of Leaves movie. No, there isn't going to be a House of Leaves movie. I recently spoke with my friends, because one of my friends went, they are really going to make one this time, and I was like, that shouldn't happen. I don't think this book could be made into a movie. I really don't. If you don't know about this book, you poor sweet summer child, there was a time before I read this book and then there's after. This book is essentially, at its very heart, is about a family, one of whom is the father, the patriarch of the family, is a famous photographer, and he moves with his partner and their 2 children and their dog to this beautiful house. It's supposed to be, I think, in like kind of rural-ish Virginia. And when they get to the house, everything's all good. Will, who is the patriarch, is like filming things in the house because he's a filmographer, he's a photographer, so he's like taking footage of the house. And they realize as they get to know the house that they find hallways and doors that weren't previously there. They find that the house is larger on the inside than it is on the outside. And you just delve deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the mysteries of this house. And basically what he gets on film is then put into a manuscript that this man writes. This mysterious old man writes about the Davidson record, the filming of this, which then that writing about the Davidson record is then found by a man who's writing annotations for this book named Johnny Truant. So it's like this story of this house that's within a writing of it, within another writing of it. There's many, many layers. So if that isn't confusing enough, if that isn't enough, that like, how do you juggle all of that? The way this book is written, a lot of it is so contingent on how things are laid out in the book. Which again, could be if you're very smart, and it could make a very interesting blueprint for how you write the screenplay and how you use physical space in the book. Maybe this unlocks something in someone's mind, but I'm sorry, I do not know how you translate stuff like this into into a movie. I simply don't. But that's what makes this book, when you read it, it's what makes it so terrifying, because you're reading these already very scary concepts, but you don't know what's going to come onto the next, you don't know what's going to come onto the next page, and so you're just like, There were times where I would read this, and then I would go brush my teeth after I'd read through a lot of, and then been like, oh, I wish I didn't read that. Now I gotta go to bed. Just the nature of how layered this book is, how textured it is. It's really reliant on the written word, and I think movie-wise it would be very difficult to translate without losing all of the other textures that make it so horrifying. I think it would get very simplified and thus lose a lot of its complexities and a lot of what makes it so terrifying. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I think if you're gonna want to digest this, just get the book. This book is so good. So good. Not on my list of favorites, but like very close to being. This is very close to being a favorite. So, I gotta pick this up again at some point, but I'm scared. Next is another big one. Another one famous for being big. Another one famous for your liberal arts boyfriend had this in their room and they didn't really read it, but they still love to mansplain to you that they read it. It's Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. That's not a personal anecdote, by the way. That's just like a generalization if you went to a liberal arts school. You know who I'm talking about. I did read this book in 2020, because again, I had literally all the time in the world to read this book, so I thought, what better time than to read this? I'm not going to say that I understood every moment of this book. I think if you do try to say you understand every moment, I think you're lying. There's so much in this book. Essentially what you have here are two separate worlds, both in Boston, Massachusetts. One is a very elite boys' tennis school, high school, so these boys are basically playing to almost the Olympic level, competitive tennis. And then in the same town of Boston, Massachusetts, you have a halfway house of people who are trying to kick a drug addiction. So, and those are like the two main spots, but then there's so much else that cohabitates the world that this Boston, Massachusetts is in. There's a lot going on, and when I tell you this is an encyclopedic, capital E encyclopedic novel, where there's this whole back section that I have marked off is all just footnotes. And the footnotes in themselves have worlds that you're like, whoa, didn't think we were going down there. Now that I've read House of Leaves, I like want to go back to this, because I read this before I read House of Leaves. But I think the reading of House of Leaves actually like would help me get my brain around how to zone into this book. There were parts of this book where I was really zoned in. There was parts I was like, I don't know. I don't really know what I read, and I'd have to go back and read it again. But well worth it. Well worth the time. I definitely really enjoyed it. Very postmodern. David Foster Wallace loved a postmodern moment, and this definitely was it. I think this would be near impossible to put into a movie. I really do think. For the similar reasons to House of Leaves. And that there is so much going on that I think a movie, just for sheer time, like would have to simplify it. And would thus, you'd lose some of the layers. Because even though we may be in the boys' tennis school right now talking about that, it still has larger implications on what's going on globally when you're talking about that. The title, Infinite Jest, referring to Hal's father's masterwork, essentially. How would that be portrayed? That part of it maybe would be focused on more than it is here, but that's just kind of lurking in the background. It's not even really like the main thing. It just, there's so much. the freaking train hopping kids. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. That's a whole footnote. Which that footnote, what made me go, but would that even make the final cut? I don't know, you know? So like, because there's just so much. I think this is meant to stay in the written word. I really do. Try to tackle it. I say go for it. This is one of those books I think people think that they aren't smart enough to read, or they get scared by it. If there's another global pandemic, let's please hope that there isn't. But if there comes a time where we are inside again for a long time, or if you know you're going on vacation somewhere, or you know you're off for the week and you want to like really delve into something, do it here. But I will not be producing that movie with all the millions I have. I will be producing something else that I've just recently spoke of, but I will not be producing this. Another book, one that I read this year that I think would be tricky, would be The Blind Assassin. in the parts of this, I'm like, this would be an excellent movie. This would be like, it reads almost like Downton Abbey. Like, it reads almost like, ooh, all these people post-war and this mansion in Canada. But then, once I really finished it and got the whole scope, I could see why they didn't make this into a movie. I think I've explained this book before. I definitely just spoke about this book in my mid-year freakout because it has one of my favorite characters of the year, Iris Chase. She's one of my favorite characters of the year so far. She's a great crabby old lady, and we love those. But essentially, you have the story of the Chase sisters. They grow up in Canada, around Toronto, so sort of at the beginning of the 20th century, going on into the rest of the century, and it's about them growing up. It has a novel within a novel inside of it called The Blind Assassin. Now, the characters in The Blind Assassin are such a way that you don't know who they are, like you just think they're these nameless characters, but it's revealed later who they are supposed to be, and I figured it out probably about halfway through. I was like, I'm pretty sure I know who this is, and I was correct, but the sheer, like, devastation of it, I wasn't prepared for. I was like, oh, like, I knew it was, but oh my god, like, that's so sad, and like, oh, it's so good. But I don't know how you would be able to have the novel within the novel going without revealing who the two characters are. That would be very tricky. Again, someone smarter than me could probably figure it out. Maybe you do The Blind Assassin in an animation style that's different and then do everything else in live action. I don't know. There might be a way to do it. This book has been out long enough. I'm sure people have thought of it already and maybe haven't come up with it or haven't come up with the interest in the project to do it. But I just think it would be very difficult to do. I think this would be very hard because of the characters. Love this book, and it would be really cool if someone could figure it out without giving away anything. But I think it would be hard. Yay. So yeah, thank you for coming to my board meeting. If you want to fund me for these movies, you can send me money. You can. I just don't know how to make movies. But I am an enthusiastic consumer and lover of movies. And I'm an enthusiastic consumer of books. And when you put those two together, you just want the book and the movie to be excellent. You almost watch some movies and you're like, I don't think you even read the book. Like, I actually don't think you read the book. You didn't take post-it notes like they made us do in school growing up. You didn't take notes. And so all I want is there for just to be great movie adaptations of the books I love. Those are my little ideas. Those are the books I want to see into movies. Those are books that have movies that I want redone. And just as a bonus, those are books that I'm like, I don't know how you're making that new movie. I really don't, but best of luck to you, girl. I just thought this was fun. Oh, sorry. Let me take off my hat. I'm not a director anymore. I'm just a humble booktuber. These bangs and that beret did not really get along. But yeah, if you liked this video, you can comment, you could subscribe, you could share the video, you could do whatever you want. You're a free agent. Go make a movie. Go make a movie and just see what happens, you know? The movie Tangerine was done on an iPhone. That whole movie was shot on an iPhone. So, if you have an iPhone, you could just go make a movie. Maybe I will. Maybe I will go call up my friend George Miller and we're gonna make Moby Dick. And we're gonna make it really rad. I'm just gonna go read. That's all I really am able to do. So, until the next one, I will see you there. Bye!